If you're following the conclusion that building is a response to ministry, is that it has to be the result of something that's active and working well to begin with. Okay, so we want to think hard about, first of all, what the ministries are and what are the hindrances to those ministries, or what are the ministries that are not able to happen because facilities are holding them back. Sometimes people will build for entirely the wrong reasons. I was down on the east coast of Florida the other day, and the pastor was telling me, well, we have all kinds of petty divisions going on here, little issues. If we could just get something to unify us, and I've thought for a long time a good building project is something that will unify us. We said, Pastor, I don't want to be the counselor in that deal. You know, I don't want to be part of that. A building project, as Terry mentioned earlier, is a stress-producing event. It will cause stress. And I think Dr. Toller hammered that point home too. First, is that it will cause stress. But again, if it's done right, it can be a time of growth. But the church needs to be unified around the idea that this is really a response to ministry. So we're going to talk about this in terms of four areas: remodeling and upgrading. From a stewardship position, throwing the baby out with the bathwater makes no sense at all. So what do we have to start with? Where are we going to start on a particular project? We want to talk about born-again facilities. We'll describe that term in just a minute. And the other two are gone, so we'll get to those in just a minute. Choosing your pasture, not your pastor, but your pasture carefully. Making sure that your site is accommodating what the vision for the church is. And so that means good, solid master planning, understanding what the plan is. The master plan ought to be reflective of what the vision is for the church. And if it's not, it'll be another master plan and a series of master plans that you set on the shelf somewhere. It needs to be reflective of where the church is heading, and that means that there needs to be some discussion about, are we heading anywhere? Are we going anywhere? If not, what are some of the things that we need to do to change that? We want to talk about this 21st century philosophy first, about in context of existing architecture. We get involved in a myriad of projects where we're taking buildings that were designed at a different time in a different place for a different culture, and needing to be responsive, because that's a stewardship approach to what it is that we're doing. Here's a church that's up in Bend, Oregon. You can see the old building built. This is heavy snow country. We've done, in my old life, before I got involved as Dan's partner in Building God's Way, I was doing resort architecture around the United States. I had an office in Park City and an office down in Salt Lake City. And one of our segments in Park City did nothing but architecture. And we did a big building up in Bend. It's heavy snow country, but a lot of the buildings were built at a point in time in the past. And so this church said, we're not relevant to our community anymore. We have one of the ugliest buildings in our community, and we need to do something with our building to make it relevant. We have a limited amount of money to spend. We've got to accomplish some of the things that we've talked about today in terms of creating fellowship space and creating that approach to the building that's a little bit more friendly to the community. So they had a limited budget, and by using all of their existing facilities and changing the facade and adding a small amount of space, they were able to go from a before to this after picture that you see here that's become much more relevant. And I expect 30 years from now or 40 years from now, they may need to recreate that again. It may not be appropriate for that time. We want to make sure that we do this without breaking the bank. The new look needs to be created. It's sometimes not just simply paint wallpaper. Sometimes it's opening spaces up and creating volumes that are different than what's perceived right now. I would say in this room that we're sitting in right now, this would be a very different room if we didn't have this lay-in ceiling grid, if our lighting were different, if it was open to the structure, and the colors of the wall changed, we would be in a very different space, but essentially the same room. So as time goes on, those kinds of changes may be appropriate as the culture shifts. We need to make sure that we're reaching the needs of the group that we're reaching out to. So we've got to think about intelligently, what are those needs? And that means that we have to sit and listen. So we ask those kinds of questions as we prepare for design. Tell us what the needs are. What are the issues? We talk about this whole notion too of born-again facilities. 5 years ago, there were very few of these kinds of opportunities around. There were so many buildings that were being used, but nowadays there's all kinds of great buildings. I'm going over to Fulton, Missouri on Tuesday to work with a school that has found an old power plant building that's on the market for a bargain basement rate they've said to us, is it possible for us to take this and turn this into a school? I can't wait. I think it's a great idea. Instead of building a new building, how can we use the superstructure of this building to make a transformation to meet the ministry needs of the school for half the price that we would build a normal building? Those kinds of things are out there in the communities. And oftentimes they're out there in good, prominent locations. In fact, I was just across the freeway this morning. When I pulled off the freeway stand, I turned right instead of turned left, and I saw the church over here in the strip mall. Obviously, there's those kinds of responses nowadays where you're seeing people go into strip malls. We're actually designing a church right now in Olathe, Kansas, that decided that they want to design it as a strip mall to begin with, move into that brand new building, and then later turn it into retail space. It's a flip on what we've seen on these born-again facilities. But we really like the potential of this. Now, there are issues that we need to carefully analyze because the code officials can have a field day with you in this realm if we're not careful about it. So as we go in here, we want to make sure that we have the right answer. Sometimes we see churches, 100 people go in and say, well, we got this deal on this 80,000 square foot building. 80,000 square feet is a lot of square footage, folks. You're going to be swimming in that space. Is that really something you want to take on? And so we want to make sure that we get a facility that can really meet the needs of a small congregation or a medium, whatever the size of the congregation is, without burdening the congregation with so much space that it overwhelms them from a facility standpoint. Just don't assume a big used boat is ready to become a battleship. This kind of technology that we see floating across the Puget Sound is not going to work if we ever go to war with Japan again. We want to make sure that the facility is really meeting the needs in a lean, mean way, that we have really thought through some of those issues. Look before you leap. Not every deal is a good deal. I don't know what happened with this house. I saw the slide yesterday for the first time, and I don't know if the tree was there first or if it was a planting project that got out of hand or what happened there, but somehow they decided to design around that tree. I would suspect this is up in the Seattle area, having worked in that where trees are actually worshipped. So this is a building that we finished up for a group up in Idaho Falls, where in fact our company president Steve Hartman actually used to be in the lumber business and built this building back in the 70s. When Home Depot moved into town in Twin Falls, they lost their business, and this building sat idle for a period of time, and it was renewed by this group that came in. We gave them this vision for the way that it could be transformed, and you'll see in the next group of slides the way that it actually worked out, very much along those lines, using color and open space and some creative things to very inexpensively go in and do that. If we need to, and if the response needs to be new construction, which is certainly true for some groups too, we want to think about that, but we want to think intelligently about the way that we organize that space and make that work. And you'll hear this pattern with us using the free tools of architecture over and over and over again. Things like proportion and scale and texture and color and historical context and views. Those are free. If we think intelligently about the way that things are composed, we can come up with good solutions for not very much money.